Hey, it's Roy Newgate, and I'm back reviewing Chapter 1003. But before we get to that, if you are a returning viewer, don't forget to subscribe to my channel to stay posted on all of my content releases, and also if you are new to my channel and enjoy One Piece content like this. Now, of course, this is an extremely late review, and I thought of skipping it altogether because initially I didn't have the time, but there are some things I wanted to cover before the next chapter, so let's get right into that. At the very beginning of the chapter, we see Luffy still giving Kaido his all and punching away, trying to put an end to this fight as quickly as possible. Though this proved to be a pretty unwise move as his haki quickly ran out and he reverted to his base form. I was surprised by this, as most people would be, because the assumption was that he had already overcome the Gear 4 time limit. Earlier in the arc, it was emphasized that he should be saving his energy for the main battle, and yet he was using Gear 4 on fodder in multiple instances. We know Luffy's an idiot, but when it comes to combat, he usually doesn't make these sort of mistakes. In Udon, he did endurance training, which should have helped him with the time limit. The only way I can make sense of it though is that his limit decreased because of the application of advanced armament. One comparison I can make is with fusion in Dragon Ball. When a stronger form is utilized, the fusion time limit is cut in half, such as when Vegito uses Super Saiyan Blue instead of regular Super Saiyan. So perhaps Luffy can fight for much longer using base haki, but he doesn't actually have the option if he's fighting against a top tier and has to use advanced haki, so he'll have to work up his endurance stats by the end of this battle, because of course he won't always have someone holding his hand and buying him time to replenish his haki. Moving along, we see that Kid is expectedly caught by surprise by what happens after Luffy overexerted himself. Prior to this, he was in somewhat of a shocked state seeing what Luffy was capable of against Kaido, which you can draw a few conclusions from. It could be that this is Oda telling us Kid realizes Luffy is beyond what he himself is capable of. In any case, the battle isn't even close to finishing, so we'll see what plans Oda has for him and how he'll contribute for the remainder of the fight. Now, at a moment when Luffy is at his most vulnerable, Big Mom tried to take advantage and end his life in one swing, but Zoro quickly swooped in and saved him from the Emperor's attack. This has been a constant thing throughout the battle. From what I can recall, this should be the 4th out of 5 times on Onigashima that Zoro has saved his life. But that's to be expected from someone as alert and aware as him. He of course told us back in Zou that this is the new world and there's no time to lose focus, and reminded us again in this fight how high the stakes are. We see Killer and Kid attempt to take advantage against Kaido while he is down as they want to finish him off, but it's at this moment that he begins to recover from Luffy's attacks, and immediately coils himself up and quickly uncoils and unleashes a somewhat familiar attack in the form of Dragon Twister. We normally know this to be an attack from Zoro. Zoro reacts to Kaido's attack and calls it a natural disaster, and while taking the moment in, his grip on Luffy loosens and he loses him in the twister. Luffy, being in danger yet again and perhaps even swallowed by Kaido, is in need of saving. Zoro wasn't going to stand for this, so he counters Kaido's Dragon Twister with his own. He overpowers his attack and breaks his scales at the same time, which caught Killer and Big Mom by complete surprise. And for me as well, I did not expect this to be an attack capable of this level of damage. One thing I especially wanted to touch on this chapter though was Enma and the continuous misconstruing of how it works and what it does for Zoro. Kaido poses the question, is that katana the source of that strange haki? Of course, not everything Kaido says should be taken as fact. He's not the resident sword scholar, and his perception is simply his own stance. We were already told Enma's capabilities by an actual swordsmith in the form of Hitetsu, but for some, Kaido's words served as a sort of debunk. But if we go back to the Scabbard's attack on Kaido, that was yet again another instance of him giving his opinion, or maybe I should say reaction to what was taking place, and him trying to find a reason as to why he is taking damage. Especially now, Zoro is damaging him beyond what any of the Scabbards were capable of. None of them were able to break his scales. So in his mind, he immediately thinks back to Odin because of what he was able to do. You couple that with the fact that Zoro is literally using Odin's sword, and it makes sense why he is making this connection. As for the comment on the strange haki, the kanji used to describe it can also mean the identity of this haki or the form of this haki. So to me, this is Kaido speaking on the level of haki because it is beyond what the Scabbards were capable of, and it is reminiscent of the level of haki Odin used when he permanently scarred Kaido. Now, there are several people in the community pushing this idea that Enma is actually using stored up haki from Odin and fueling Zoro's attacks. Some in an attempt to downplay him, and others I think are just not taking everything we've learned in Wano and the story as a whole into account. Now some say Enma is a more powerful blade than Shushui, but would this not be a direct contradiction? if we are to take the approach that assumes that Enma is storing Oden's haki. Because Shushui is a black blade, and so if you're going that route, you will have to assume that it has Ryuma's haki stored for future use, and at a much greater rate. But of course, that's not the case for either blade. It's not like they're both haki banks or an infinite haki dispensary that continually creates haki out of nothing for the sword wielder. But beyond all of that, I think the worst part of it is to assume someone like Zoro, who takes as much pride as he does in his ability to train and grow stronger and overcome obstacles on his own merit, would take a handout that gives him power from someone else. That's just not who he is and not who he will ever be. Enma serves in forcing growth out of him as he attempts to counter the sword's native ability of draining the user's haki more than necessary. As he stated himself, once he gets used to that, it will mean he's gotten that much stronger. In these last few chapters, we've seen how much he was able to grow in a week of training alone, and it's really only the beginning. Though I don't think anyone could have seen this coming. Part of me thinks that the way Oda has been portraying Zoro may have been in part to do with how some people in the community perceive him. Oda is definitely observing constantly and knows exactly what people are saying. In an interview, he once said if someone speaks ill of a character of his, or perhaps calls him weak, he gets annoyed and then thinks to make them appear even stronger. A few years prior to this, he made the direct statement, "Don't speak ill of Zoro," in an interview with Nico Nico Live Broadcast. So I think it's pretty easy to make out what his motivations are. Now, I don't think that this means he gave Zoro a power boost, as that would mean he'd have to change up a lot of the story for it to line up. I think that he decided to go further than anyone thought he would to emphasize his ability. I didn't think Zoro would be breaking his scales until maybe midway through the battle. I also wouldn't have imagined that he'd elicit as much caution as he did in the previous chapter with the flying dragon blaze to the point Kaido had to dodge. Honestly, it seems like the stuff that you'd see in a fan fiction written by a Zoro fan, but no, it's the actual canon manga going this far for Zoro. But that's enough about our green-haired swordsman for now. After his attack, he saves Luffy, but then Kaido begins a new attack in which he combines his Dragon Twister and his Wind Sights for a single all-out attack. And as the Supernova are attempting to evade, we quickly transition to the lower floors where the Alliance and Beast Pirates are feeling the effects of the intensity on the roof, and we catch a glimpse of Orochi's severed head. My assumption right now is that he was removed from the arc entirely and is not coming back, though with Fukurakuju suddenly disappearing about a dozen chapters ago, I can't say that for certain, and I'm left to wonder what Oda has in store for this plotline. Has it been completely closed? Of course, from a practical standpoint, I do not see any logic in him having survived after what we saw for several reasons. But as we've seen with Oda in the past, he tends to find some way to do these sorts of things. Moving along, we see that CP0 is still in Wano and is making an observation and comments on the battle, complimenting the Alliance on their method of attack, as they would have very quickly been overwhelmed if they waged a war in the traditional sense. And one of them comments on the fall of two emperors and the global implications that it will have on the world. They also express that there is absolutely no concern with this, but the fact that this topic was brought up makes me think it further increases the chances of it actually happening. Because the main characters tend to defy expectations and reason with every single major arc that they're in. So Wano should be no different. They also touch on the commanding officers and the need to overcome them, because defeating Kaido alone would not ensure victory. So to me, this just further emphasizes the importance of the fights against the calamities, as well as the Tobiroppo, and how they will need to be stopped in the end to ensure the victory for the Alliance. And we see that the people who will ultimately be responsible for this are the rest of the Straw Hats, with a little bit of help. At the end of the chapter, we see something that most people were not expecting, and that is Kaido's hybrid form. I must admit, I was one of those people, and personally I assumed it would have been shown against Odin or in his fight against Big Mom earlier in the arc. Though, in hindsight, it would have greatly taken away from this reveal and the tension we're currently getting. Kaido has taken attacks from the Supernova in base and full Zoan form, but we have yet to see how devastating his power is in hybrid form. Just imagine the hybrid form Thunder Bagua. We can see how much larger he is standing next to a floating Big Mom, so his attack power has to be that much greater as well. I'm curious about a few things though, like will he be able to still use Clouds to fly in hybrid form, and also will he be using attacks like Dragon Twister and Demolition Breath? Will he have Boro Blast at his disposal as well? But most especially I want to see the overall design. But let me know what you think about his hybrid form down below, and also don't forget to subscribe and like the video as well.